Welcome back, everyone. This is Chapter 1, Social Influence. We're going to look at obedience, situational variables. This is the second video in a 4-part series on obedience, and this one's actually going to be rather short. When we look at variations of the Milgram experiment, we have to remind ourselves that the original study showed an obedience rate of 65%, meaning that 65% of the participants shocked the learner up to 450 volts, meaning they went all the way to the maximum. The first variation we're going to look at is proximity. Now, there are 3 sub-proximity experiments that were conducted, or at least that we're going to be taking a look at. The first one is when the teacher and the learner sit in the same room. Now, the original study had them sit in separate rooms, but what if you take the teacher, this is our participant, and you place them in the same room as the learner, who is actually the confederate, the actor, who is pretending to be getting shocked. Right now, the teacher can visually see the learner, not just hear them, can visually see him. In that case, the obedience rate drops to 40%. We went from 65% to 40%. The next proximity experiment was when the teachers were forced to put the learner's hand onto the shock plate. So there's a physical contact now, so we're getting closer and closer, right? In that case, only 30% of the participants went all the way to 450 volts. And now comes the third variation, which is slightly different. In this case, the experimenter, so the researcher, leaves the room and gives instructions via telephone. So here we are creating actually distance between the participant, our teacher, and the researcher, our experimenter. In that case, the obedience rate drops to 20.5%. So all of these results point to this following explanation, that when we gain distance, so when we reduce proximity, it allows us to distance ourselves from the consequence of our actions. And there are a lot of examples that come to mind. We do not care so much for people that live far away. We rather care for people that are close by and in our proximity. A soldier is going to have a harder time killing somebody by pointing the gun at somebody's head compared to sitting in a room controlling a drone from the other side of the planet. And so that is a very interesting dynamic between this factor, this variation, and the original experiment. The next variation we're going to look at is location. Now, in location, we're going to move the entire experiment down into a rundown building off-site and not in a fancy-looking university room. In this case, the obedience rate drops from 65% all the way down to 47.5%. And so here the argument is that having a legitimate setting gives the person of authority a sense of authority, right? I wouldn't trust a dentist that has a sloppy, dirty dentistry room. Rather, if everything's in spick and span, I have more trust that they actually do their work well. So, and I will be more gladly following their orders. Whatever they tell me to, I'll gladly do it. And I wouldn't be so inclined to follow orders if I didn't have that trust in the authority. The last variation is uniform. In this case, we're going to replace the experimenter who pretends he has to rush off, and we're going to replace them with an ordinary member of the public who wears everyday clothes. And that participant is now pretending to be the experimenter. In this case, our participants' obedience rates drops to a 20%, which is all the way up from 65 to 20%. So therefore, we can say that a uniform is a strong symbol of authority, which we all accept within society. Here's a summary slide that puts all of these variations of the experiment in order, in ranking, so you can see here highest obedience rate, 65%, went to 450 volts in the original study, all the way down to uniforms. The lack of a uniform led to a 20% obedience rate. Let's look a little bit more at uniforms. This study right here by Bigman, 1974, put Confederates out onto the street wearing different kinds of clothing. So a security guard clothing, milkman, a jacket and a tie, and demanded from people on the street to pick up litter. The result was that when the Confederates were wearing a uniform, people were twice as likely to obey the Confederate when they were dressed in a security guard uniform versus a jacket or tie. So that tells us two things. First of all, that situational variables exist, just like Milgram's variations show, and they're quite powerful. And secondly, uniforms have a particularly strong effect on us. And this entire experiment validates this experiment, this variation in particular from Milgram, saying that yes, this is very much true. It has to do something with the uniform. Let's look at whether Milgram's research can also be applied to other cultures as well. These research here from the Netherlands did a very similar experiment where participants were asked to give stressful comments to interviews, and the obedience rate originally was 90%. But when the experimenter left the room, obedience fell significantly. Okay, and so the conclusion from this is that Milgram's finding also work in the Netherlands, which suggests that the results can be applied to other cultures. However, counterpoint by Smith and Bond is that the US and the Netherlands are culturally very similar. We cannot apply the findings to all cultures in the world. Would we get the same result if we were to do it in, I don't know, China? Or now it's your turn to guess these countries. The mystery countries are Bolivia and Namibia. So we have Europe, Asia, South America, and Africa. What if we do it in culturally very different countries? Would we get the similar results? Well, that is for us to find out, or for other researchers to find out, right? So that is a very valid point. So that's it for today. If you'd like to download these slides, you can find them following the link in the video description below. If you are a teacher and you'd like to quiz your students on this content, you can sign up for free on ZenTeach and use our quizzing tool. Consider donating, following us on Twitter and YouTube, and definitely subscribe to get all the latest YouTube videos. The next lesson will be on obedience.